All right, here we go. Another edition of Red versus Blue. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
And we are back. Lots going on. We were both on vacation, and you went to Alaska on a Canadian cruise, and I went to Europe on a European cruise. And we're back now. You had some observations in Canada, right?
Well, I did. Canada is one of these places that are all pretty laid back, all pretty sort of, to themselves. But there was a lot more evidence of Canadian patriotism. People had flags in their front yard. You could buy red hats that said, Canada's already great or Canada's not for sale. You saw the big flags displayed over the public buildings. A lot more expressions of Canadian patriotism and unity and opposition. They don't find the whole 51st state thing funny whatsoever. They don't get that joke. It's interesting that Little Caesars has a tariff rebate policy. So they have a 25% discount on their pizzas, and they had dates going back to February about how they're rolling back the tariffs on pizzas. They're sort of mimicking and sort of thumping America on some of these economic policies. If Trump has done nothing else, he has invigorated Canadian patriotism.
Well, that's great. Well, in Europe, as I mentioned to you before we went on the air, I found no discussion of politics whatsoever. The people you run into in Europe are people that accept tourism and they want to have Americans come visit. So there's very little discussion. I saw nothing going on. I had heard we were going to face some protest in Barcelona. I saw none of that. Normal.
Well, normal there. I will make an observation, though, from our prior trip to South America, where we saw evidence of Chinese involvement on both coasts. In Santiago, there was a major Pacific fisheries conference in our hotel that appeared to be dominated by Chinese attendees. In Buenos Aires, in our hotel, there was a Argentine-Chinese economic cooperation conference, which appeared to be very well attended. So while we are retrenching from the third world, China is expanding its reach and its influence very aggressively.
The results of that we will see. And
indeed.
It may not be great. All right, let's go with what we know is going on here in the U.S. First of all, the news has been dominated since we left with the big, beautiful bill. Well, is it a big, beautiful bill? And it got passed and is all going to be well now, Keith?
Well, Mike, I go back to that old expression that it's possible for two things to be true at the same time. Arguably, Donald Trump has had the best month of his presidency. He got the bill passed. The debate shifted to cutting taxes, which is ground that he's good on. The economy held steady. He was generally winning at the Supreme Court. Tariffs receded from the public mind, bombed Iran and basically got away with it. It did some damage. Not clear what we did, but no casualties on the American side. And so everything looked to be pretty good for the president. But on the other hand, passing the big, beautiful bill has splintered the mega coalition. Elon Musk is now forming a third party. Trump has driven Thom Tillis out of the United States Senate, which creates an opening for Democrats. The bill was thoroughly trashed, not so much by Democrats, who are pretty much on the sidelines, but by other Republicans. So he's got some real issues there. And of course, Putin continues to ignore his peace efforts. So while this may have been the president's best month yet, it may also be the high watermark. History and time will tell.
So the big, beautiful bill passed, and it takes a while for some of these things to take hold. What do you see happening with that bill in terms of affecting the voter coalitions?
Well, the bill passed by one vote in the Senate and by two votes in the House. What it will do is it will extend the 2017 Trump tax cuts. Otherwise, there would have been a multi-trillion-dollar increase in taxes on all Americans. It also provides deductions for state and local taxes, which will help voters in California, New York, and other high-tax states. It increases the exemption for seniors. It has some nominal no tax on tips, some nominal no tax on overtime language that comport with his campaign promises. But Republicans have had the worst political messaging since defund the police on this bill, because while it was passing, this is the biggest tax cut in history, which ought to be a march to victory, a march to electoral domination, and instead it became a slow-moving train wreck as Republicans from Elon Musk to the Freedom Caucus to people like Josh Hawley trashed this bill all the way up to its adoption, even while some of them, flipped over and voted for it at the very last minute. It could not possibly have been done in a more politically foolish or politically ineffective way to get the bill passed. As a result, this bill is underwater with the voters by pick your poll anywhere between 20 and 25 points with the population, even though it cuts their taxes, even though most people have a very strong economic benefit from this relative to their taxes. But what it also does, and it's interesting to note that the tax cuts become effective this year in 2025. So you'll be able to deduct your state and local taxes for this year when you do your taxes in April. The cuts to Medicaid start going into effect in 2026 and then after the 2026 election. Some might call that a cynical effort to, move the pain down the line and not to do it. But nonetheless, that's what's going to happen. And it's going to impact red states more significantly because the population of red states is more dependent upon Medicaid. Seniors are more dependent upon Medicaid. Veterans are more dependent upon Medicaid. Minorities are more dependent upon Medicaid. All of the groups that were brought into the Trump coalition are basically getting whacked in terms of some of these cuts. Now, they say, it's just making people work. It's just, kicking off illegal aliens. It's just cleaning up waste, fraud, and abuse. We're going to see rural hospitals are closing across America, and it's going to have a big impact in the districts of some of these people who voted for it. James Carville called it a mass extinction event. He says 40 Republicans are going to lose because of passing this bill. Now, I'll tell you in a minute why I think he's wrong. I do think Republicans are going to lose the House, but it's not going to be by 40 seats. But the Senate was probably right back in January when they said we should have done two bills. By doing one bill, I think Trump has missed a lot of the political advantage of extending the tax cuts.
And you did mention, though, that most of the impact of this bill will not take effect until after the midterm elections. So
some of them will start early. Some of them will begin to see hospitals and states will begin to make cutbacks. So some of the money to states will begin to be cut back early. So there's going to be a campaign there, and it's going to be an impact. When Reagan did the tax cuts, it was, we've cut taxes, the economy is going to grow, the economy grew, and everybody thought Reagan was a genius. Here, all the Republicans have been saying the debt's going to grow, and the debt is going to grow. And they're going, why should we like the bill we just passed? I know my taxes got cut. Now, taxes did get cut, and that's what's going to make a lot of people say, I can do the math. I came out ahead on this. I'm for it.
Right.
That's why Republicans may lose the House. They're not going to lose it by 40 seats.
Right.
Here's the problem the Democrats have. Tom Suozzi, who took over the seat from George what's-his-name in New York, a very solid guy. He says, I'm a Democrat. I voted against it, but 75% of the bill I like. Well, great. That's not exactly a stinging indictment of the bill where you say 75% of it I could have voted for. And that's the problem Democrats are in. How can you campaign and say, I would not have voted to extend the tax cuts? And then they'll say, well, I would have extended them except for billionaires. Democrats have a math problem. I think billionaires start at $400,000 a year for a family. And so people have realized that. That's why, as I said before, when Harris said she's going to cut taxes for 100 million Americans, the other 249 million Americans figured out they were going to get screwed.
Yeah.
So the Democrats have got to figure out a better message.
All right, let's talk foreign policy now. Bombing the Iranians. What effect is that going to have on anything?
Well, we don't know yet. It appears to be a short-term victory. There's a rally around the flag, as there always is when we engage in military adventurism, whether it's in Iraq or whether it's in Grenada or anywhere. And it was a successful mission. I mean, the fact that we could pull this off and, they didn't even know we were there to shoot a missile at us tells you about the technological superiority of the American military. It remains to be seen exactly how long or how bad we have deterred the Iranian nuclear effort. They appear to have moved a lot of their nuclear material away from the bomb sites. People say it's a matter of weeks or months that they've been delayed, not years. And they've got to make a tactical decision about what do they do. And nobody really believes they're going to fully give up on developing a nuclear weapon, which could in the long run make the world less safe. It's interesting to note that we did this without the involvement of any of our allies. And so unlike President George H.W. Bush, who brought a coalition together of across the nations, or George W. Bush, who brought a coalition of the willing together, Donald Trump acts unilaterally on his own. Now, they did get a ceasefire in the Middle East. It may lead to peace. We now see one of the groups in Hebron, one of the tribal groups, wants to break off from the PLA and join the Abraham Accords, be recognized by Israel. So maybe there is some ice breaking in the Middle East. Remains to be seen.
But the Ukraine situation is still out of control.
Yes, Trump had a very, as he called it, unproductive and an unsatisfying call with Putin, who basically said, yes, I have in fact been playing you for the last 6 months. So we're going to do what we're going to do here and screw you. And that just shows you the ineffectiveness of his personal diplomacy with Putin. And hopefully he's learning the lessons about what a dangerous world this is and why American force is required to stop the bad guys.
And unfortunately, that kind of got lost in the big, beautiful bill discussions.
It did. You got to wake up every day in Ukraine and look and see what pushed us off the headlines today, because every time something does it, it works to the benefit of Comrade Putin.
One other thing you touched on a little bit, but how big of a split is this in the mega coalition right now?
Well, Donald Trump clearly dominates the Republican Party. That much is clear. Here's the problem with MAGA. Its rhetoric and its actions are not aligned. Donald Trump speaks all of this stuff. They tear down the government, blow it all up, fire everybody. But then he realizes that maybe you need weather forecasters in Texas when you have a major flood event. Maybe they realize you need FEMA when you have a major disaster and hurricane in Florida. And all of a sudden, practicality comes in there. And the ideologues who believe all of this stuff, their minds cannot get around that. They can't accept two things to be true at one time. So when they're told that this is a debt bomb that's going to destroy the country and we've got to make cuts, they don't know what we're going to cut, but they just believe, let's do that. And then you've got Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, who now says, and in fact has, started a third party, primarily to defend Tom Massey, the singularly most ineffective member of Congress who voted against this and votes against everything, who's going to run against Republicans saying that the bill didn't cut enough. And so the Democrats are going to say, well, we cut too much, we cut to the bone, we cut Medicaid. People are going to feel that. And you've got other Republicans saying, no, we didn't cut enough, we should cut more. Well, when they're pushed to say exactly what more they want to cut, you cannot stem the debt tide without cutting Medicare, Social Security, and the Defense Department. And once they get into that discussion, they're sort of lost in the weeds. So what we saw is that a real discordance amongst the rhetoric and the belief system of these MAGA people who believe slogans, and slogans don't always translate well into policy positions. And this is on the budget, on the debt, on war in general, on Ukraine, on whether or not Musk is a hero or a villain. Now Trump is bashing Musk. And it's interesting to note this whole reinventing government thing, which resulted not in $1 trillion, not in $2 trillion, not in $180 billion, but in $9 billion of savings in one rescission bill related to public television and AID support for foreign aid that was passed. And you just have to wonder what a missed opportunity this was. In 1981, Reagan had the Grace Commission, serious cuts from aid in the first year. A lot of the recommendations did not get made, but they were serious, focused policy recommendations. Al Gore, in reinventing government with Bill Clinton, made significant personnel reductions and changes to government done in a very thoughtful, methodical way. Again, Donald Trump said it best about the DOGE efforts when he said, was it all bullshit?
Let's explore just for a quick second before we say goodbye, this third party idea. I don't think it's going to work. Elon Musk has a lot of money to power something like that, right? But if it does have an impact, who will it impact the most, the Democrats or the Republicans?
Well, what he's going to try and do is take on Republicans in Republican primaries by running to the right, supporting greater budget cuts. He may be successful in one or two cases in taking out a vulnerable incumbent, but I doubt it. Ironically, the big, beautiful bill is going to benefit California and New York Republicans the most because they fought the hardest for the SALT benefits, which are going to benefit those taxpayers, which are going to get an actual tax cut. And those have been the marginal battleground districts, New York and California, New Jersey, in the last 2 or 3 elections. So that's going to be helpful to the Republicans. Where Musk can make a difference is if he gets a third-party candidate on the ballot in a very close swing district, and that guy takes 5 or 10% of the Republican vote, that will swing that seat to the Democrats. Now, you also have what I call the Goldilocks just right formula. If they're being attacked by the Democrats, Republicans are, for cutting too much, and they're being attacked by Musk for not cutting enough, Republican candidates can say, we must have cut just right because both sides hate us.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I think the Musk effort will be a lot of money spent for nothing. He's going to light a lot of money on fire. He may get Tom Massey reelected. That will, be a useless gesture. He may make a difference in a couple of districts, but I think generally he's going to light a lot of money on fire.
Lighting money on fire is his way, though, and he's got plenty to do that with.
He does. He can solve some of our, that ought to be part of our, all of the above energy policy. We'll just burn money.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot. We will return at some point and carry on this discussion. We were supposed to stop this at the election, at the end of the election, but here we are, well into the new administration, and Keith and I are having fun doing this, so we're going to continue to do it until you tell us to stop. Thanks again, Keith. Another great job, and be sure and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and go to the Facebook page, like us on Facebook. Tell your friends about us too if you have friends that are politically open to new programming. This is a great show for that. So until next time, thanks for joining us on Red versus Blue.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.